Thank you for the introduction. Again, I'm Suranjan Day. Today's topic is on FDA's Adverse Event Reporting System, also called FAERS. This is my disclaimer. So the outline for today's talk is Introduction to FAERS, Understanding an ICSR, Electronic Reporting of ICSRs, and FAERS Public Dashboard. So let's get into Introduction to FAERS. FAERS is FDA's post-marketing safety surveillance database for drugs and therapeutic biologics. It's also FDA uses FAERS to monitor, identify, and analyze adverse event and medication errors. FDA staff in both CDER and SBIA, they regularly use FAERS to examine as part of their safety monitoring, routine safety monitoring, and any signals that is identified from FAERS data is further evaluated. So what does FAERS contain? So it contains spontaneous adverse event reports that are submitted to FDA from product manufacturers or directly from consumers, healthcare professionals, or other reporters, and it supports FDA's post-market safety surveillance. Where do we get this data from? So patients, consumers, and healthcare professionals, they submit this data voluntarily to FDA through the MedWatch program, which constitutes of 4% of the reports. And the same consumers, patients, and healthcare professionals also voluntarily submit to manufacturers. But in that case, for manufacturers, they have to comply with the regulations, and here is the regulation, and that constitutes of 96% of the reports. And they all come electronically. So the FAERS database, the reports that are in FAERS database are medication errors related reports, adverse event, and product problem that has an adverse event. And they are for drugs and therapeutic biologics, and then for tissue products and blood products. If you look at it, looking at this chart, if you see that the volume of these reports, I mean, at tremendous rate, these volumes are going up. 2019, we had more than 2 million reports. And since 1969, we have more than 19 million reports that has come into FAERS. So what is a spontaneous report? So it's a communication from an individual to a company or regulatory authority, describes a suspected adverse event. It's passive and voluntary in nature. So what are the factors that affect this kind of reporting of spontaneous report? There could be media attention, there could be litigation or class action lawsuit. So you will find suddenly the volume has gone up for reports. The nature of the adverse event, the type of drug or the product and indication, the length of the time the drug is in the market. The more mature drug probably will find less adverse event. New drugs you will find more adverse event. The extent and the quality of the manufacturer surveillance system, prescription or over-the-counter product, and the change in reporting regulations. So what is FAERS great for? Its strength includes all US marketed products, includes all uses. It includes broad range of population, elderly, children, pregnant women, and especially good for events with rare background rates. Useful for events that occur shortly after exposure, detection of events not seen in clinical trials, and then finally identification of reporting trends, possible risk factors and risk population, and other clinical significant emerging safety concerns. So this FAERS is great for that. FAERS is useful for events with high background rates, worsening of pre-existing disease, issue that go beyond data capture, So MedWatch has certain data elements. Then you have the comparative incident rates comparing drugs in the same class, and adverse event that could also be manifestation of the disease. For some of these bullet points, uh, there are other ways to, do your review and analysis. So with that, knowing what FAERS is, what kind of data we get, the building blocks are the ICSRs that we receive in FAERS. So I think it is important for us to understand what an ICSR is. And so we will go into now understanding an ICSR. The things we will try to understand is the electronic submission of ICSR, the case information, the version of ICSR, patient characteristics, drug information, other required administrative information, the reporter, case summary or the narrative, and then we will go into some conclusion. So under electronic submission, you have the standardized data element, which is very important to have for electronic submission. Uh, the scope is all types of ICSRs, irrespective of source or destination. ICSRs referring to post-marketing safety reports, and FAERS is only for CDER CBER. We also have tissue and blood reports, but they don't have a mandate to submit electronically. So understanding an ICSR. So these are some of the components that we will go over when we try to understand an ICSR, and we'll go over each of those items on this picture. All right, version of an ICSR. So in the version, it's very important to understand the manufacturer control number or the safety report ID that determines the volume, the version, sorry. If the manufacturer control number stays the same for every submission, then automatically they will be created as newer version and they will be considered as follow-ups then. The MCN should stay for the life of the case to avoid duplicates, and all reports must have the manufacturer receipt date, even for literature reports, and the manufacturer's name. The sender organization is very important. Even though a CRO who is processing and sending these reports to FDA, they're doing that in behalf of the manufacturers. With patient characteristics, some important areas, like the age of the patient can be determined through date of birth and date of reaction, or the age at time of reaction and patient age group. So the different ways to determine age, but what are the most precise that is available with you, you should be submitting that precise information. Many a times we do see that a lot of these information are in the narrative of that ICSR, but I think because they have the structured data elements, it becomes important that these submission are done through those structured data elements. You can still have them in the narrative, but it helps everyone to do the appropriate or the correct data analytics. And in the patient ID, please never put in information which deals with patient's personal identifiers. For drug, the first drug listed in the ICSR should be the primary suspect drug, and submit with the appropriate application numbers, and these are the formats how you would submit the application numbers. For drug information, again, no pre-marketing IND reports as a primary suspect drug. As of now, we talk about the future. If you have a trial going on, a clinical trial going on, and the suspect drugs involves a marketed product, approved product application, the case has to be submitted to FAERS after the blind is broken with the application number. Of course, it has to meet the criteria and regulation for post-marketing safety report. And finally, no study reports until the blind is broken. Some administrative information about the ICSR, you know, especially when you're submitting through an E2B standard, make sure you fill in the appropriate fulfill expedited criteria, the safety report ID that will determine the versions, and then these other elements. We have authority number, company number. They're not mandatory, but I think good to have, but definitely the sender organization. From a reporter's perspective, you could have multiple reporters. The first should be considered as a primary reporter, uh, considering looking at if it's medically confirmed, if the reporter is a physician. For the literature, please put the title, and for the literature also, the literature articles must be submitted as a PDF, and the occupation of each reporter. Finally, we have the case narrative. The case narrative is limited to 20,000 characters. You should describe the story of the adverse event and any follow-up information. If you have, must have the complete narrative with additional information, and all ICSs must have the full narrative. So your narrative is telling you what's your story. Uh, Also, that in the narrative you would write with the story, you would talk about the adverse event that occurred, and there are structured fields where you would submit the adverse event and make sure the adverse events are MEDRA coded adverse event terms. Coming into some new concepts, where we have the combination product rule came out, and with this you be submitting through an electronic standard. We have two DTDs, 2.1 and 2.2. 2.1 does not support combination product, but 2.2 supports combination product. So companies who do not have a combination product can use 2.1, and companies who have both combination and non-combination product could use 2.2. I mean, they'll have to use 2.2 for non-combination for combination products. And here is the URL which takes you to the regional technical specification for all the combination product data elements. All right, so in conclusion, format of ICSR, it includes, provision for transmitting all the relevant data elements. Not every data element is applicable for every transmission, and a substantial number of non-required data elements may not be known, but once it is known, please do submit follow-ups. And the most current information on the case available to the sender must be provided. So with that, we conclude the topic on understanding an ICSR, and we move into now how do you submit these ICSRs. So we talked about FAERS, the building blocks are the ICSRs, and now how these ICSRs, the ICSRs needs to be submitted. So electronic submission of ICSRs. So there has been a rule. And why do we need electronic submission of ICSR? Because submitting in electronic format makes it easy for FDA to process, review, and archive. It improves the agency's system for collecting and analyzing these reports. Also, these reports, it enables agency to improve its identifying and evaluating of these reports and more rapidly, and they can disseminate this information to support FDA's public health mission. And having a standard also enhances global pharmacovigilance by facilitating electronic transmission and exchange, and then because of the common data elements and transmission standards. Here is a rule that was published for electronic submission. So electronic submission actually has got two methods. Method number one is through safety reporting portal. You have to fill in a form and submit one report at a time. The other method is to go through the gateway, where you can submit via E2B, and you can submit in batches, and you can get acknowledgement back saying the report was accepted or not. But with the safety reporting portal, as soon as you hit on the web form and you submit, your report is submitted. So with the E2B route, or we call it as database to database transmission, you submitting using ICH standard, it's XML, and attachments must be in PDF format. For the safety reporting portal, you first need an account. If you have been submitting through the gateway and want to move through the database to database transmission, yes, you can do, but you cannot do vice versa. Other way around is not allowed, and all your attachment must be in PDF format. Here is just some screenshot of the safety reporting portal. It's based on the MedWatch 3500A form, and so you have the screens available. And many of the 3500A form has been made structured on the safety reporting portal just to get the data as much as structured possible. For the periodic safety report, the descriptive part is to be submitted, but through the ECTD route, whereas the non-expedited ICSRs must be submitted through either the safety reporting portal or as a E2B format. And for non-expedited ICSRs must be submitted as described in the option on or before the periodic safety report due date. That's what I just said, that you have two methods. What's the future state of electronic submission? We plan to have pre-market safety reports, and we have another presentation where you hear about pre-market safety reporting. We have the technical specification that was published in 2016, but after which we have had 3 meetings where we communicated the regional data elements for FDA for R3, and the R3 data elements are posted, the regional elements for R3 are posted in this URL, which includes all the ICH core data elements along with the regional elements and the forward compatibility of the regional elements. So let's get into one challenge question. What are the two methods? What are the methods of submitting ICSR to FDA? So I'll give you 3 seconds. And the correct answer is D, database to database or safety reporting portal. All right. So now here, this slide actually gives you all the references. Very important slide you will want to keep to yourself. At any point in time, you can go and look for information here. These documents or these URLs will give you all the information. And if you have any questions, then you can always write to us. All right. So with this, we now have seen what is FAERS, the building blocks, the ICSRs, how they are to be reported, and now how this data is disseminated, especially to public in a redacted form. So what we're going to learn from public dashboard, we'll describe the FAERS public dashboard, demonstrate how to use the FAERS public dashboard to view adverse event reporting metrics, and then how to look for information on a specific product. So the FAERS public dashboard is a very user-friendly platform. Both public and industry can use, and especially for industry, you can also look for the direct reports that has come to FDA that did not come to the manufacturers directly. And there are different outlets for this public data, the FAERS data. They are the Open FDA. You can go and download JSON files. You can go to FAERS quarterly data extract. You can download ASCII or XML files, or you can go to the interactive access, wherein you don't have to download anything or create your own database, but directly go here and be able to review those cases. But there are very main key points that you need to consider in order to use this dashboard. The quality. There are many instances of duplicate reports, and not every report contains all information. And the existence of report does not establish causation. So which means that, when you have a drug and an event, does not mean the drug caused that event. Also, that event may have caused with other reasons. Maybe the disease has progressed, or maybe, the patient may be taking some other drugs concurrently. Uh, and then these reports just reflect only the reporter's observation and their opinion. Uh, Also, this report has not been verified, so many of the reports directly come from consumers, so they're not verified or medically confirmed. Also, the rate of occurrence cannot be established with this report because you just don't know, if these are the number of adverse event we got against how many prescriptions that were dispensed and so on. Also, with patients, especially these are consumers or patients who look at this website, looking at this website and looking at the occurrence, the number of reports, they should not take harsh decisions. They should always talk to the doctor before stopping or changing their medications. And then, any reported serious outcome does not necessarily mean that the suspect product name in the report was a cause of the outcome. Right? So in all, FAERS data by themselves are not an indicator that the drug is causing the reported adverse event. All right, so let's go to a challenge question, that what are the key points you need to consider when viewing the content of the dashboard. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 options. I give you 4 seconds. And the correct answer is F. All right, let's go through another question. So here is an example where a doctor, which is a private physician, views adverse event data on a product. Looking at the volume of the data set for that product, he concludes that the product is risky to prescribe. Did Dr. Doe make the right informed decision? And the correct answer is no. The reason being the existence of a report does not establish causation, and rates of occurrence cannot be established with these reports. All right. So before we go into demonstrating the dashboard, I just want to give some conclusion about the FAERS dashboard before we get into the live demonstration. So in conclusion, FAERS dashboard gives the public and industry a more user-friendly platform for accessing this FAERS data. FAERS dashboard makes adverse event data more accessible and transparent. Existence of a report does not establish causation. Rates of occurrence cannot be established with the reports. So with that, we will go into doing the live demo of the FAERS public dashboard. After the live demo, if you have any questions, we will have a few minutes to answer some of the questions that you may have through the presentation. Thank you, and let's get into the live demo.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? All right. So good morning. So I am going to share my screen.
Good morning, Suranjan. Actually, you don't need to share your screen. The screen, if you want to maximize the screen that I'm sharing, since you took control of it, you can now use the mouse there. There we go.
All right, great. So you saw the URL. So if you click on the URL, you would go to that page and launch the FAERS public dashboard. The FAERS public dashboard actually starts with a disclaimer. The key points that I talked about is listed here. You need to read and understand the disclaimer, accept it. And as you accept it, you come to the screen where it gives you a very high-level view of all the reports that has been reported from 1969 to this data is updated quarterly, so the data is as of March 31st, 2020. The initial screen kind of gives you some key indicators of total reports, total serious reports, total death reports, overall that is in FAERS, and it then breaks it down by the different report types. And in this case, the direct reports mean these reports have directly come to FDA from patients, consumers, or healthcare professionals. Expedited and non-expedited are industry reports, so they have come from manufacturers. The other type of data that is available here, you can see data by who is reporting, from where it has been reported, or reporting by the seriousness. So it gives you basically a breakup of that data. This is showing from 1969. You can look at last 10 years. So if let's say if I do 2019 if I do from last 10 years, I can click on the last 10 years and it shows me the last 10 years. If you are specifically interested in a specific year, you can go and pick specific years and do your selection, and then it gives you those specific years. Okay. Then you have, these are overall view, the overall view of all the FAERS report. You can specifically go and also do a search by the product. So if I may, I will, let's say, search on a product, let's say, so I select a product. You can select up to 5 products, and the product gets listed here. And hitting this go, it then gives you the count by year. It gives you by reaction. So this may be very interesting to see what are the top reported reactions for that product. And then you can look by age group, which is again the different age groups that has been specified here. You can also look from the perspective of the sex, and then you have reporter type. Next is you can look on this data based on the reaction groups. So if you look at this data on reaction groups, it then takes you by the SOC, the system organ class, and then you have by different age groups, and then it also stratifies by the sex, the reporter type, and the reporter region. This again takes you to the next level, where now you can look at this data by the total case counts by the SOC, and then you can break it down by the different events or the PTs, the preferred terms. This all comes from MedDRA because they're all coded to MedDRA, and the case counts. and then you can look from a perspective of by year and the outcomes, and also look at by age group and sex. And eventually, at any point, if you are interested in specific filters, and in this case, let's say I am looking at, let's say, all the hospitalized reports. So as soon as I click, that becomes a filter, and automatically this changes from the 90,000 to 27,000. And now I'm interested in looking at the line listing of those cases. And in here, it then gives me the line listing of the cases. Now again, remember, these are redacted data. That means not every data element is displayed here. And now within this, you can also look for, you can do your filters by clicking on a specific data field, wherein you can filter by, let's say I'm looking at all males. I click on this, and I have filtered that to from 27,000 reports to, so there's a little lag. From 20,000 reports to 11,000 reports. Now this section can also be exported out, this line listing, and every chart can be exported to with the image, the PDF, and then you can export the data. So this will open up in Excel. So this is, and at any point, if you have any questions, you have an FAQ here, wherein you can go and ask your questions. Now this will be very useful for industry because all the direct reports you can filter by, and there is a column there. And these direct reports are those reports that that have come directly from consumers, which you may not have received, and you could filter and get this listing, and then request for a FOIA for the details of these reports. So with that, this typically is I do a session which is about an hour, hour and a half. So so I will stop here and get back into any kind of questions that we may have and the amount of time available.
Great. Thank you so much, Suranjan, for that fantastic presentation and a great demo. I feel like it's always so helpful to see real time what we're talking about. So thanks for showing that. And we have a lot of questions that came in while you were talking. And if anybody else would like to submit questions, please do that in the lower right-hand pod, and we will try to get to as many as we can. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with just a couple questions. So one person wanted to know, how can sponsors get a database generated from FAERS for signal detection activities? Can FAERS be downloaded by, can all the data be downloaded by the public?
And the answer is yes. At the slides which you saw, that you have database, you have data which is the FAERS public, the quarterly data extract, and as well as on OpenFDA. You can actually download the data and create your own database. Many organizations do that, and since data is updated every quarter, you can, to start with, you can always get the whole set, and then as you go through quarter by quarter, you can download the data and update your database and do your signal detection. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Great answer. I'm sure they'll be very happy. So our next question is about reports. So if you could go ahead and explain the difference between direct, expedited, and non-expedited reports, we'd be very interested in that.
So as I talked about during the dashboard demonstration, the direct reports are reports that come directly to FDA from the consumer healthcare professionals or patients, and expedited and non-expedited reports are deemed as expedited and non-expedited based on the regulation. So they come from manufacturers. And here the dashboard comes, helps you to identify the reports that directly came to FDA. And if you choose to do some follow-up on those reports, you can then be able to download those, the redacted version of the report from the dashboard and then request for additional information through a FOIA request. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much. All right. Our next question is about adverse event reports again. So makes sense. Are the adverse event reports received by FDA directly from the healthcare provider and patients? Are those forwarded to manufacturers, or should the manufacturers routinely monitor FAERS to detect these cases?
Right. Good question. I don't think there is any rule which dictates that you have to be continuously monitoring. I think it's from the company's perspective that that they do their monitoring as part of pharmacovigilance. These reports are something which the companies could go to the FAERS public dashboard to look at the data, and once they have identified the reports for their products that have come directly to FDA, they could then request through the FOIA process to get the details of the reports. Thank you.
Great. Good answer. All right. So one person wants to know, is there a chance of erroneous submission to FAERS? They believe there was an issue with one company last year. Was that from a study patient? And how can a company or FDA safeguard, especially with electronic IND submission on the horizon?
Yes, very good question. And we are also on top of this. So first and most important thing, FAERS, as I explained, is a post-market database. So which means only post-market safety reports must be submitted there. When it comes to pre-market reports, then the MedWatch forms are to be submitted through the ECTD route, which I again talked about in my slides. So it's very important that as far as the sponsor is concerned, so sponsor has to take some responsibility on submitting to the right channel. But from the FDA's perspective, as you have seen for post-market data, as long as you have 4 or 5 data elements, the report can be submitted to FAERS and FAERS would accept it. So many a times we do see the data, not every data element is reported. As a result, it's very difficult to very easily identify between the post-market and pre-market. So it's very important that we from FDA try to do our best by looking at the data elements and their values to identify if it's a pre-market. And if it's a pre-market, we have caught about close to 3,000-4,000 reports, or 5,000 reports almost. We have caught in last about 8-10 years where they were accidentally submitted to the post-market route. When we go into pre-market, which you're going to hear about from our next presentation, you will hear about different routing mechanisms that will show that how a pre-market report needs to be submitted to a specific route and a post-market to a specific route. So, so I think the responsibility lies on both sides, both from the sponsor side and the FDA side. But FDA, we try to do our best based on the data that has been submitted to identify its pre-market report and put it into a whole different bucket, which never touches the post-market side. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Suranjan, for explaining kind of where FDA is coming from and how people can prevent things in the future. So our next question is, how should a ICSR be submitted if the gateway is not available? Will the FDA still receive a paper report for an interim submission followed by the gateway submission once the capability is restored?
So we really, if gateway is down, now depends upon gateway is down on which end. So if gateway is down on FDA's end, then of course, you know, the sponsors, for the sponsor, it's if you look at the compliance timeline, of course, the compliance timeline may not be will not be taken into consideration because FDA side is down. But if something is down on the sponsor side, then it's better to the best way, I think it's given in the guidance of electronic safety reporting rule, that you could if you're submitting E2Bs, then you could burn the XMLs into a CD and send that CD to us so that we can upload the XML files. But we do not want companies to submit on paper, as we all know that it takes a lot of time and effort to process them, and with that volume, it kind of sometimes becomes impossible to process this report. So the short answer is that if the gateway is down from your end, you could burn the XMLs into a CD and then mail it to or courier it to FDA. And also the safety reporting portal, which is there, that is a website. Sorry, the safety reporting portal is a website, so companies who are using the safety reporting portal will still continue to submit to the portal. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So our next question is there a possibility that there are duplicate cases in the FAERS database? And what does FDA do to examine that?
So, good question again. Yes, we talked about this in one of the bullet points of the public dashboard. There are duplicate reports because we receive the report from the manufacturer. We would receive the report from the patient, from the healthcare professional. So, there could be like more than one report. And the only way that we do try to identify this as we review these reports, if we have identified these duplicates, we'll mark them as duplicates. But we also do some kind of deduplication algorithm which is run during our data mining to identify duplicate reports and then use the appropriate case series based on that. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. And another question about reports. So are some of the received reports excluded? And if they are excluded, what are some of the reasons they would be?
Okay. The reports that typically we would not want into our FAERS database now, because it's a post-marketing safety database, are the pre-market reports. And definitely they are not to be submitted, and we do not want to keep them in the FAERS database. It's a post-market safety database, unless you have a marketed product which is in the trial and now the blind is broken. So, but other than that, any kind of pre-market safety reports, I mean, we do get foreign reports. There is no restriction to that, and of course all the domestic reports for all the products that are marketed in the United States are to be submitted and is available in the FAERS database. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Great. And we have another question. So great questions. Thanks for everyone for submitting these. So for Suranjan, what are some examples of unique identifiers for patients?
Unique identifiers for patient. I mean, we have seen. There is a concept of that you have to have an identifiable patient, and now an identifying patient could be achieved by having a patient identifier, which could be a number, but making sure that it's not a social security number or that can very easily identify the patient. It could be a record ID, it could be a ID of a medical record number, or something that does not very easily identify a patient. that could be one data point. Another data point to have an identifiable patient is you have the sex of the patient, you have the weight of the patient, you have a date of birth of the patient, you have the age of the patient, and that could make that report, the ICSR, show that there is an identifiable patient. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So for the next question is about the ICSRs. For medically complex ICSRs, is there a way to go beyond the 20,000 character limit?
Unfortunately not. The 20,000 character limit is a limit that has been defined by ICH, the International Council of Harmonization. Once we go into ICE2BR3, which is the newer version, that expands the character limit from 20,000 to 100,000. So yes, at that point we would be able to accept 100,000, but we're not ready for that yet. So currently, the ideal situation would be to be able to, fit the narrative or explain the narrative in a way that could fit into the 20,000 characters. Thank you.
All right, great. And thank you for taking all of these questions. This is going to be our last question of today. Thank you for everyone for submitting them. And this will be a little bit of a forward-looking question. So when do you expect that the FDA will require R3 submission?
Good question. We are still in the implementation phase of our new FAERS. So as you know that we had FAERS before FAERS. 2013 we had FAERS, and now hopefully next year we will have FAERS 2.0. FAERS 2.0 plans to implement E2B R3 with the regional elements, and so when do we expect companies to submit? There has been no date that has been set as of today for when sponsors will be required to submit R3. More communication will come on where we are with our FAERS implementation and our R3 implementation specifically. But the specifications are out. So our suggestion would be to go over, for the sponsors to go over, look at the specification, because that will have an impact on your COTS tools that you use for pharmacovigilance and case processing. And you may have to work with your vendors on that. But as of now, short answer, there is no timeline set. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Suranjan. This is great question and answer session and a great presentation. So thank you again.